weeks ago, Pastor Bill shared his story, his highs, his lows. It was the chaplain at ORU, and then leaving that position, he had his first paycheck, right? Paychecks are important. He's got his first paycheck, and then had to leave a comfortable place. So when I heard that story 2 weeks ago, I'm inspired to share my own story with the highs and the lows. And it's a opportunity, and it's also a privilege and honor to share my story, because in my story, God's in it. And I will share with you through different time. If you look at the titles, from borrowed time to God's time, because my life, I was not a Christian. I was a Buddhist. And so, hang on to your seats. So, okay. So my family, I was born in Vietnam, and there are 10 of us. I have 5 older brothers and 4 older sisters in Vietnam. And in Vietnam, my father was a dentist by training. He wasn't educated. I think he was 8th grade education. My mom was 6th grade. And because there's a lot in the family, we cannot afford everybody to go to school. But my grandfather taught my father to become a dentist. So we had a more or less comfortable life in Vietnam, and that's the high point. The low point was that the communist government, and we didn't have a lot of freedom in Vietnam. For example, in a communist state, there's no freedom, there's no sense of privacy. If they go into your house, they knock on the door. They say, hi, I'm not sure they say hi, but they just come to the house and they say, like, this glass looks nice. I think I want to take it. And then what's for us to stop them? Nothing, because that's the police, that's the state, and they can take whatever they want, because that's the rule, right? So that kind of living, my parents did not like that. Plus, I have 4 older brothers of military age. And imagine my parents would see them, all 4 of them would just go into military, and during that time, after the Vietnam War, Vietnam was in war with China. So it was a lot of state of chaos for my family and also for the Vietnamese people. And so my parents said, like, we gotta leave the country, anywhere but here, because there's no sense of freedom, no privacy. We had to leave. Thus, around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, we loaded up on motorized rickshaws, those rickshaws you probably see on the TV and movies. And we would go to the harbor. At the harbor, we saw a fishing boat, because we're not coming back to Vietnam. This is it. It's like gone. And when we enter the fishing boat, there were 2 decks. And I will share with you the story after you would see this video. When you saw the boat hanging near the shore, my family's boat was exactly like that. Because there's no, when you go on a cruise, you probably have a nice entry, you have a walkway to get to the shore. There's nothing like that. Nothing like that at all. So I remember when I was by the boat, I was 6 years old, I remember jumping out the ship and went like, zoom, like that. And I have no clue if I'm gonna be, someone's gonna pick me up. But fortunately, my brother picked me up and then showed me, you saw the pictures up there? Exactly like that, just carried me off like this, like a log to the land. So that was kind of like a traumatic experience, arriving in Malaysia like that. So I was I don't know who taped it, thank goodness for CBS News to capture that. It was exactly like that, landing in Malaysia. Before landing in Malaysia, I want to share with you the story of on the 3 days on the open sea. There were 2 decks on the fishing boat. There's the upper deck and the lower deck. The upper deck, I was a kid with my brother, my mom, the infirmities, the mothers, and then the bottom deck is more the healthy adults, the ones who are able-bodied, but yet the circulation at the bottom deck of the boat was really hard to breathe. So some people got sick, and it was not a cruise, that's for sure, right? You could see that it was not a cruise, but that experience was definitely a low point of my life because I could have died. The high point, even though it was 3 days, my family was alive, and we didn't encounter pirates. Because knowing that so many people would leave the country from Vietnam to go to Indochina, Philippines, Thailand, and Malaysia, that pirates would go after the open prey and get gold, other valuables. And fortunately for my family, we did not encounter pirates, and that there in other stories, in other refugees leaving from Vietnam, stories of violence, story of assaults, stories of robberies, and stories when the boat doesn't have like a clear map, it would shift, it would adrift, and there are stories of cannibalism. So I could have died on the open sea, but yet the high point, God was able to protect my family through it all, because even my brother, who in California now, he's agnostic or a Buddhist, he would say like, God protected us, even though, because what else protected us? Nobody. But God was with us in that time. So you saw the pictures. We led deeply into this shore in the sand, and we jumped off. And because the ship was so entrenched into the sand, into the shore, they could not push the boat out. Thus, we were stuck in Malaysia, and we just jumped. And then the authorities said, like, "Okay, y'all here." We didn't say like that, but they said like, "Go ahead and find camp around the shore," which we did because they cut off the boundaries for the refugees and the residents of Malaysia. After arriving in Malaysia, we set our camp exactly like that. So what does it feel to be a refugee? You probably heard stories probably on Wednesday or Tuesday about 500 people died near Africa when the ship capsized. So as a refugee, there's no legal status because there's none. U.S. citizens have your own rights and privileges, and also permanent residents in the U.S. As a refugee, there is no legal status. But if there's a definition, they are displaced individuals around the world. One of the meanings is that if you take refugees and move them wherever you want, there's no recourse. I mean, you can go to court, United Nations, etc., but legally, there's no rights. So in the refugee camp, my family and I know what's like to feel powerlessness, hopelessness, vulnerability, and a sense of living in destitute. And that's a low point, right? There's no sense of asserting myself as a person. And that we rely on the United Nations to provide the food and the water, and that we were very dependable. There was no advocate for us. And if there was a feeling, I'm not sure you're feeling that now or this week, is that if you're feeling down and out, like, where is God? I did not know Jesus back then, but Jesus protected my family and I, and just took care of us, even though I did not know Jesus until 7 years ago. So one of my brothers had to know the system at the refugee camp in order to get the food, because limited food, limited resources, limited water, and we had to survive and find ways to work together. And the high point was that we worked together in spite of so much adversity. Share your story, because next to the shore there's a lot of wind, and when you eat the food, the sand goes to the food. And so my grandfather was very creative. What he did was that all the cans we received from UNICEF, we ate all the food, and then we cleaned the cans and we put it down on the floor to make sure there's at least a floor so we can at least walk on the camp and then stop the sand from going to our food. And so that's when we're, as a survivor, you think survival skills. How can we survive in an adverse, hostile environment where we don't have any rights at all as human beings? And the high point, I thought that even though people would not care for us, but we still stayed together. Because I would hear stories where people would go insane because sometimes the conditions are so adverse that they said, I cannot stand it anymore. And so people would argue and fight, and because human beings normally cannot live like that. So the high point, I'll have one uncle in the US work the immigration system to sponsor us. So we left Malaysia, and before the day we left, we had a big celebration to come to the US, and we're so grateful that, it could have been like anywhere outside Malaysia. It could be like, I don't know, like Polynesia, I don't know, anywhere. Any like Western state, Canada, Australia, Sweden, Finland, Europe, anywhere. Like you probably hear stories now about Syrian refugees going to Greece, Turkey, Germany, Sweden, so just to get out of their socioeconomic conditions. So fortunately, we left Malaysia on the airplane, not on the boat, fortunately, on the airplane to come to the United States. And we landed first San Francisco and then to Los Angeles. And you probably heard from Pastor Bill saying that he's from Los Angeles, California. When he talks about LA, I feel like LA is represented, I know LA. So we got there. But even though when we came to the United States, we still live in poverty because we could not bring with us anything from Vietnam and Malaysia. There's nothing to bring because as refugees, we're displaced persons and not have any assets at all. So when we arrived in Southern California, we still live in poverty. It's not like we left poverty and went to Beverly Hills, It was like, poverty to poverty. And we rented this place. Back then, the federal government gave us assistance for refugees under Jimmy Carter administration. Nothing political, but just at that time, it could be any Republican or Democratic administration. But at that time, we got assistance as refugees, and then we stayed in a apartment where it's about more or less this stage, but yet there's at least 6 or 7 persons living there where my sister slept on the couch, my brothers and I slept on a twin-sized bed, and then my parents slept on a different bed. And my brother said, like, I cannot be a dentist because I was sitting next to the bathroom. Maybe the smell didn't stop make my brain smarter, So he would blame the bathroom situation. So that's the condition where we were living because we did not have a lot, but yet God was with us and kept the family together. And to say that it's tough. It's tough surviving on the fishing boat. You probably saw that. It's tough to survive in a refugee camp given conditions because when we were there, it was just sense of hopelessness, a sense of like, when I was a refugee, there's no planning for 401k. There's no plans for retirement going to, let's go to Disneyland, or let's go to SeaWorld, or let's plan for 30 or 60 years from now. Every day was survival, just understanding, having the food from UNICEF, so we just survive each day. And coming, being now back in Southern California, at least we can think about having a future in U.S. society. So after starting from scratch, we were on welfare, we were on food stamps. I was one of those kids who had free lunch tickets and please give me a meal. I was humble enough because, coming from nothing, it's okay, right? But I took that experience and continued to work hard. Luckily, I love school. I continued to just keep on studying because I like school. And graduated from UCLA and then went to University of Chicago for my master's and eventually Hastings College of Law in San Francisco. And later went to, then came to DC. In 2003, after graduating from law school, I came to DC working for NASA. And then, life is pretty good. I mean, graduate from schools and, have a good job, not bad. But I realized, what's missing? Life is pretty good. I have a salary. What's not here? What's not peaceful about here? So I remember I share with you the two videos because those two videos are very defining of my life, of my story. The fishing boat experience, because I could have died. That's why the term from borrowed time. You probably heard that from Holocaust survivors. When they survive, they feel guilty surviving the Holocaust camps. And they would say, I'm living on borrowed time, right? So I'm using a similar concept. I could have died on the fishing boat. I could have died on a refugee camp because you saw the video about the squalor, about the living conditions. People get sick a lot in a refugee camp. So I was thinking, what can I do, given the refugee camp experience and the fishing boat experience, to make an impact? I've been doing community service when I was 12 years old. And luckily, I've been kept consistently since 12 years old because that's when we do service. Lisa was talking about service and the church. This church is a lot about service, which is awesome. When we do service, it has a direct connection to God. Direct connection to God. Because when we think about ourselves, there's a link directly to God. So I've seen in my experience, I've known Christ 7 years ago, but now as a Christian, it just becomes clear to me that when we serve directly to Jesus and then connecting to God's story. So I came to DC and working, having a good time in DC. I realized it's not where I feel like my calling is not being met. And I feel like, there has to be more than just making money and having a salary and, living this nice DC life. And there were 3 individuals sharing their stories with me as Christians. As I shared with you earlier, I'm a cultural Buddhist. So I hear stories about Christians saying I'm gonna do this, but the next day or next 6 hours, they do something different, right? So you heard about that. Doing one thing, saying this, and then doing something different as Christians. So I wasn't very attracted to that because if I'm being hypocritical, I might as well just be hypocritical while being a Christian, right? So why do I have to become a Christian? So I met 3 individuals. The first one works for a former CIA, former employee, CIA. The second is a NASA program executive. The third is a nonprofit leader. The first one, former CIA employee, she took me to her church. We met through the International Career Advancement Program, and she said, you gotta go to my church and check it out. I've been to churches before. I've been to Hawaii. I went to a Unitarian church, and it's oh, nice. It's cool, kumbaya. It's kind of nice. It's not bad. I said, well, she accepted her invitation, went to church. Our African-American church, love it. It's just, at that time, it was a little bit too much for me, and maybe about God's timing, because they were singing, they were crying, they were jumping in and down. I feel wow. I'm not there yet, so sorry, Say thanks, but no thanks. That's person one. She shared her story. The second person, NASA program executive John Lee, he is from Korea, South Korea, and he would tell me his story about growing up in poverty. where he would live, where places where there would be mice around his house. And like, if you saw the 2 videos, mice, they're like my friends, right? Like, it's no big deal. Because it's like, comparing to mice and that, what's the difference? But I think what interests me was that he came from a similar background like I was, poverty, destitution, hopelessness. But yet, he able to switch around to become a program executive at NASA. I mean, like, that's not an easy thing. I mean, just like, I don't know many people just coming from destitution to program executive at NASA. I don't hear a lot of stories like that. And that would make me think like, okay, what is his story is like? Third person, the nonprofit leader, coming from impoverished background as well, from maybe a single mom family situation, but yet able to start a nonprofit to help other professionals to get their MBA. I was thinking, she's also a Christian. So 3 individuals sharing their stories of why they're being a Christian. I say, okay, hold on. What is the common thread among all 3 of them? They're Christians, okay? Not bad, that's a good start. Then I thought, well, it doesn't hurt if I would check out this Christian thing, right? Just check it out. If it doesn't work out, I jump ship, right? It doesn't hurt, there's no penalty. It's not like Roach Motel, you come in and get out, right? So I said, okay, let's check it out. And one time I was talking to this nonprofit leader. She said, like, look, you believe in God. Yeah, I believe in God because if I didn't believe in God, surviving the fishing boat and then the refugee camp, someone has to intervene. So I believe in God. Okay, she said, great. So she drew this line. She said, okay, if you cross over this line, then you have a chance to know what it's like to become a Christian. I said, okay. I jump over, and I said, well, I don't feel anything. But yet that action by itself, because I was hungry to know what Christ, or who Christ is. Even though my mouth was saying, no, 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 but yet my heart and my head was thinking, who is Christ? And what is making the 3 stories change, coming from poverty to being success in their professions? So she gave me this book called Driven by Eternity by John Bevere. I read the book really fast. I just, lack of phrases, I chewed it up. And I said, like, this is awesome. I kind of know what God's Spirit is like because God, as Pastor Bill was saying, God cares for those who are meek, humble, distressed, those who are out, those people who don't have a lot of resources. And I felt like I could relate to that because I am one of those people, or was. I could relate with their socioeconomic conditions. So I gotta check it out. I have to check this thing out because 3 people sharing their stories, their lives have changed, impacted because of Christ. I have to find out what's going on. So I did. A coworker at NASA gave me the Bible. The first one, she said, like, this is the first Bible for you. You got to check it out, which I took and said, thank you. And then I went to Capital Life Church 7 years ago. I didn't have a car back then, so I took the Roslyn Metro to go to the Spectrum before this beautiful building, to go to the Spectrum. No idea. I'm going to check it out to see if it actually is real. Because if it doesn't work, I'm going back to Buddha, right? Doesn't hurt. There's no penalty to going back to Buddha, right? Buddha's not gonna kick me out. So I'm gonna check it out. So I talked to Pastor Bill. He shared his story. Like, I was curious. 7 years as a Christian, I have a lot of years to make up. So I was on turbo speed, right? Just to know what Christ is like. And Pastor Bill for his grace, was patient enough to talk with me about being a Christian. And I said, like, this is real. Christ is real, because when I read Romans and Galatians and Ephesians and Philippians, you see God's character, God's love and power, and his resurrection power, redemptive power. And because of Christ, ever since then, 7 years ago, I used to be a cultural Buddhist, and now as a Christian, hungry Christian, I make up a lot of time Christian, 7 years. And I want to share my story because of Christ, my story able to connect with his story, with his meta-narrative. When I'm connected to his meta-narrative, it means that I live with joy, peace, and abundant life. Okay, it doesn't mean that I'm going out and I have a Ferrari and I live in a mansion. It doesn't mean that. What it does mean is just give you peace in spite of so many turmoil, so many adversity in our society. Not having a good job or pay raise or girlfriend, boyfriend, etc., all those things. I'm still a human being. I still have my own, I'm still working on the things I have to do as a person. But as a Christian, I know I have God's power, that he is with me. And that is the total difference. But without having Christ, as a Buddhist, I would not be here. You see the difference. 7 years ago, I would not have the confidence to share with you my story. The 3 individuals sharing their stories with me have changed my life. And then I'm using my story to share with you the power of a story that Pastor Bill shared 2 weeks ago, because stories matter. And, we talk about Christ in you, Christ in your influence, Christ in your relationships. It's about that. And for centuries and decades, we learn through stories. I did research, real quick, a story. I did research on poverty when I was at Princeton. And the Hmong culture near Vietnam, how they teach it generation to generation is through stories. They don't have a lot of people like us Roman letters, like, let's write a paper, send me a paper by Monday, Tuesday, you get a grade. No, the elders would teach their young folks, or the younger generation, stories. By sharing stories, that's how the culture passes down to their families and through their community. So the storytelling is not only for the U.S., it's around the whole world. And I think Pastor Bill, with his doctoral thesis, is capturing the power of a story. And my story is to let you know that ever since 7 years ago, I've known Christ. He has flipped my life 180 degrees. So what does that mean? It means that I'm not afraid of living my life of, 1, creating opportunities for others. 2, investing in other people's lives. 3 is to continue to serve others, like CLC is doing, is encouraging folks to serve other people. So that is the power of what other people sharing their stories to me. And because of them sharing their stories to me, I'm able to use my story to share with you all the power of Christ, redemptive power, resurrection power, and my fishing boat experience, and then my refugee boat experience. If God's not in those experiences, I don't know what is. So something has to intervene, because something. Even my brother, who's a Buddhist, would say, like, God was with us. So I want to share with you 2 themes, right? First is that Jesus Christ matters. Matters because it has impacted my life. It has changed and transformed my life and my family member's wife. My wife is back there. That our lives are changed and transformed because of Jesus. That's for sure. That's number one. The second is that our stories matter. You see, example of me, if those three individuals, former CI employee, NASA program executive, or the nonprofit leader, have not taken their time to share their stories with me, then I would not be here sharing my story. So Christ in our influence through his stories. And I want to talk about Galatians, my only scripture of the testimony. So in Galatians, I think 6:9, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to family believers.